Do you remember the very first time that you were taught about truthfulness? You remember that? Truthfulness or honesty? I remember very distinctly the first time in my life when I realized that a person is supposed to be honest and truthful. It happened one day at Henry's Rexall drugstore in Shippensburg, a little town close to where I grew up. And it happened that particular day as we walked in. I was standing there looking at the candy counter, the candy display, and all that new candy that was there, which was actually to my advantage. You see, I had a bag of candy on the drive into town, and I ended up finishing it. And so I didn't have any more candy, and I saw it there. I saw it there on the display, and I just helped myself. I don't remember consciously deciding, but I do remember the lesson and the consequences, which tells me apparently I must have picked up a bag of candy and decided to walk out the store with it. Mom and Dad were in the back getting a prescription filled or something. Anyway, we all made our way then to the car, and on the drive home, I started snacking on my new bag of candy. And my father, he asked this question. He's like, "Where did you get that bag of candy?" Of course, I told him. I said, "I got it at the store, Dad." Well, he stopped the car, and we immediately turned around and went back. And my father says, "Tell the guy what you did. Tell the guy what you did." And so I had to confess to the store owner that I had taken this bag of candy without paying for it. And my dad, my dad made me confess to be truthful and honest that I had done something wrong. For me, that is the very first lesson that I can recall in learning about the necessity of being truthful and honest. Truthfulness is the topic we're going to be taking a look at this week as we explore what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. We are in a study looking at 52 different characteristics that should be found in the life of a Christian, going through a workbook entitled Disciples Journal, and we're going to examine truthfulness this week. My name is Pastor Greg, and you're watching Transforming the World. If we were to take a look at the definition of truthfulness, truthfulness out of the dictionary, it refers to the moral character of a person or the presentation of accurate information. From a Christian standpoint, though, truthfulness is it's related to righteousness, which is a conduct that conforms to an accepted standard of right and wrong. I like the Eason Bible Dictionary, though. The Eason Bible Dictionary relates truthfulness to righteousness. It's, again, conduct that conforms to a standard of right and wrong. In other words, truthfulness is a reflection of our commitment to God's teachings. Yes, God has commanded that humanity be truthful. This isn't something that happened right off the bat. God really didn't address the call for truthfulness or honesty. It seemed to be part of the culture at the beginning for a while, at least, up until the point that Adam and Eve sinned. And do you remember that encounter? Right after Adam and Eve sinned, and the encounter there with God, when God says, what's going on here? What happened? And who told you we're naked, in other words? And rather than confess what they have done, Adam begins blaming. He blames Eve. Eve blames the serpent. There was no truthfulness with God. It says, I did something wrong. So throughout the years, humanity struggled with being truthful. Very few people were probably very truthful. I think deceit, lying, and dishonesty was part of the culture even after the flood. It was obviously part of the culture when Moses and the nation of Israel leave Egypt. When Moses and the nation of Israel leave Egypt, God starts handing down a lot of commands. God says to the people of Israel that here's the standard of conduct. Here's the way that I expect you folks to live. And these are all found in the laws that God passes down. A lot of those are in the book of Leviticus. Some are in Numbers. Every now and then you'll come across some laws in Deuteronomy and whatnot. But Leviticus 18, Leviticus 19 especially, if you take a look at Leviticus 19, there's some very valuable lessons there about honesty. For example, God says, don't twist justice in legal matters. That's verse 15, Leviticus 19. He gave instructions to the people of Israel because this sort of dishonesty was obviously common in the rest of the world. He says, don't use dishonest standards when measuring, verse 35. He says, your scales and your weights must be accurate, verse 36. Again, why did God feel that it was necessary to instruct his people to be honest? It's because dishonesty was something that was rather common in the world. And God says, look, you folks are supposed to be holy. You're supposed to be set apart from the rest of the world. And one of the ways that we demonstrate that we are different from the world is that we become truthful in all of our dealings with other individuals. We're honest with one another. We don't cheat one another. We don't lie. We do what is right and above the board rather than try to work the system for our own personal gain. Now, as we ponder this lesson from God, I want us to look at question number 12 in the self-evaluation section of our workbook. And that says, do I demand honesty from others but not expect it from myself? I would say for sure most of us would desire honesty. We want other people to treat us fairly. We want honesty. We want truthfulness from those that we meet. Unless, of course, it's a wife who comes along and says, does this dress make me look fat? Does she really want truth? I mean, husbands, does your wife really want you to be truthful? What do? You say, do you look at her and say, sweetheart, this is a no-win, right? No matter what I say. You say, no, then I'm lying. Anyway, there is a call from God for us to be truthful and honest in all of our dealings and in all of our conduct as we work with one another. And for this reason, this truthfulness, God's call for truthfulness, is a reflection on Him. After all, as we claim to be followers of God or followers of Christ, because of our relationship with Jesus Christ, we are adopted into God's family. We become His children. And as His children, we represent God to the rest of the world by our conduct. When the world looks at us and says the world looks at us and admits that we are Christians, then they're looking for us to demonstrate certain characteristics of God. And one of those is truthfulness. And so our truthfulness and our honesty in all of our dealings with other human beings is a reflection of God's holiness. We are to be holy because He is holy. It's one of the commands that God gives there. Proverbs 8:22 says that God detests lying lips, but He delights in those who tell the truth. God detests lying lips, but He delights in those who tell the truth. So right here off the bat, right off the get-go, truthfulness is something that God demands from us, something that God commands from us. And it's not one of those things, truthfulness isn't one of those things that God says, if you're truthful, your life will be a whole lot better. Because sometimes being truthful makes our lives a little bit more difficult. And that's true. That's honest. Sometimes when you tell the truth, things don't always go well for you because not everybody wants to hear the truth. I understand that. But our truthfulness is a reflection of God's holiness. Your truthfulness, let me say this again, your truthfulness is a reflection of your holiness. And since we claim to be part of God's family, we are God's children, then our truthfulness is a reflection of God's holiness. We honor God when we choose to be truthful in all matters and in all situations. So the answer to that particular question that we came across here in number 12, do I demand honesty from others but not expect it from myself? As a Christian, we should expect honesty from ourselves. If you remember, one of the things that Christ commanded we are to do to others as we would have them do to us, which means if we want truthfulness and honesty from others, then truthfulness and honesty needs to be found in us. Interesting characteristic, truthfulness, an interesting command. What I find to be the most interesting, that God actually had to write this into his word. God actually had to write in his Bible for us to be truthful, which is an indication that lying, deceit, and dishonesty is what comes natural. And that's something that we'll talk about a little bit later on this week, about how to overcome those natural tendencies to tell lies. Well, I hope you can join me again as we continue our study of truthfulness this week on Transforming the World. Thanks for being with me. My name is Pastor Greg.